There are stories that exist on the thin boundary between history and myth. Tales of doomed voyages, ghostly whispers in frozen wastelands, and unexplained horrors that refuse to rest. Among the most chilling stands the tale of HMS Terror, a 19th century warship that set sail in search of the Northwest Passage and vanished. Over the decades, fragments of evidence surfaced, painting a grim picture of the crew's final days. Yet beyond the tragic facts, there are ghost stories, the whispered accounts of malevolent forces, spectral apparitions, and an unearthly curse that clung to the ship like a second hull. This is the story of HMS Terror, a tale of courage, desperation, and supernatural dread in the endless Arctic night. Join me as we step into the frigid realm where day and night blur, where hope is easily swallowed by ice, and where something sinister waits in the silence. This is a story that will chill you to the bone, and not merely from the Arctic wind. In May of 1845, two ships left England on what was supposed to be a voyage of discovery, HMS Erebus and HMS Terror. This was not just any mission. This was to be the final piece in the great puzzle of the Northwest Passage, the fabled route connecting the Atlantic to the Pacific through the Arctic. The expedition was led by Sir John Franklin, a seasoned naval officer with Arctic experience, though some whispered that he was past his prime. Accompanying him were 129 men, including Captain Francis Crozier, commander of HMS Terror, a veteran of polar exploration. But the real stars of the mission were the ships themselves. HMS Terror and HMS Erebus were the most advanced vessels of their time. Reinforced hulls, steam engines, and heating systems designed to withstand the merciless Arctic. They carried 3 years' worth of supplies: salted meat, biscuits, lemon juice to fight scurvy, and most importantly, 16,000 tins of preserved food, a relatively new innovation at the time. The British Admiralty was confident. This time, Franklin and his men would succeed. By July of 1845, the expedition reached Baffin Bay, where they were spotted by two whaling ships, waiting for the ice to clear before proceeding westward. It was the last time anyone saw them alive. After that, silence. For nearly 2 years, there was no word, no distress signal, nothing. By 1847, concern began to spread. Franklin's wife, Lady Jane Franklin, urged the Admiralty to send search expeditions, but at first they hesitated. The Arctic was unpredictable, and many assumed Franklin was simply waiting for a thaw. But by 1848, the government could no longer ignore the possibility that something had gone horribly wrong. Multiple search parties were launched. The first, led by James Clark Ross, scoured the Arctic seas, but found nothing. It wasn't until 1850 that the first real clue emerged. On Beechy Island, searchers discovered 3 graves, the first physical evidence of Franklin's expedition. The graves belonged to John Torrington, William Brain, and John Hartnell, young sailors who had died early in the voyage. Their bodies, perfectly preserved in the permafrost, revealed an unsettling truth. They hadn't just died from exposure. Autopsies conducted over a century later would reveal something far more sinister. Lethal amounts of lead in their bones. At first, the lead was thought to have come from their tinned food, which had been poorly sealed with lead solder. But later studies suggested another source: the ship's water filtration system, which may have steadily poisoned the crew over months, even years. Lead poisoning can cause paranoia, confusion, and hallucinations. If the entire crew was affected, what horrors did they see in the endless Arctic night? By 1846, Franklin and his men had become prisoners of the Arctic. The ships had sailed past Beechy Island and into the treacherous waters near King William Island. Then, on September 12th, 1846, the ice closed in around HMS Erebus and HMS Terror. They would never sail again. For 2 long years, the men endured the frozen wasteland, waiting for a summer thaw that never came. The Arctic had locked them in its grip. Supplies dwindled, scurvy took hold, and one by one, the men began to die. On June 11th, 1847, Sir John Franklin died, though the exact cause remains unknown. With their leader gone, the remaining officers faced an impossible decision: stay and wait for rescue, or abandon the ships and attempt to walk to safety. By April 22nd, 1848, 105 survivors left the ships and set out on foot. They dragged heavy wooden sledges filled with supplies and lifeboats across the ice, hoping to reach the Hudson Bay trading post, 600 miles away. They never made it. The journey south quickly turned into a nightmare. The men were already weakened by starvation and disease, but their suffering was not just physical. Lead poisoning was ravaging their minds. Their bodies were failing, their limbs growing weaker, their minds dissolving into paranoia and hallucinations. Inuit oral histories describe the last days of Franklin's men in haunting detail. Gaunt figures stumbling through the ice, speaking in slurred, unintelligible voices. Some spoke as if to unseen figures, muttering feverishly in the howling wind. Others collapsed mid-stride, their hollowed-out eyes staring into the endless white, as if they had seen something in the distance, something the others could not see. Some were found crawling on their hands and knees, too weak to stand. Others had lost their minds entirely, raving like madmen before collapsing in the snow. But there was something else. According to some Inuit accounts, the explorers weren't just fighting the elements. They were being hunted. Stories passed down for generations among the Inuit tell of an ancient spirit of the ice, a creature that feeds on the fear and despair of those who dare trespass into its realm. Some called it a monstrous entity, part polar bear, part shadow, that stalked the crew across the ice. Others whispered of spectral figures, seen moving among the tents at night, their eyes glowing with an unnatural light. What were these visions? Could it have been the effect of lead poisoning? Phantoms conjured by dying minds? Or did Franklin's men disturb something long buried beneath the ice? Something that watched them, waited for them, and struck when their spirits were at their weakest? There were other stories. Some Inuit hunters spoke of an evil presence that had always lurked in the Arctic, a force that did not want men to conquer its domain. Was it the land itself, resisting the explorers' intrusion? Or something older, a spirit of vengeance, punishing them for their trespass? One eerie account suggests that when the men first began their march south, not all of them left at the same time. Some groups vanished into the snow, their tracks disappearing into the white abyss. When others passed by their abandoned camps, they found their belongings still there, food stores untouched, and fires still burning, as if the men had simply walked away, drawn by something unseen into the storm. Had some of them willingly followed an unknown force? By the time searchers discovered their remains, the truth was undeniable. Bones found along the trail showed signs of cut marks, evidence of cannibalism. The last survivors had broken the ultimate taboo, driven by desperation, madness, or something darker. At first, it was thought that starvation alone had driven them to such horrors, but some of the bones were not just butchered, they had been cracked open to extract marrow, a sign of extreme, deliberate survival cannibalism. Some researchers believe that the men had no choice. Their bodies were already poisoned, their flesh starved of nutrition. But the Inuit spoke of something different, something far more unsettling. Some hunters claimed that they saw the explorers turn on one another long before they should have needed to. They whispered of men who, in the dead of night, became unnaturally violent. Their eyes blackened, their breath slow and shallow as if possessed. Had something entered them, taking hold of their minds? There were also rumors of bodies left untouched, abandoned in the snow with no scavenger marks, as if the other men had been too terrified to go near them. One particularly disturbing Inuit legend spoke of a group of sailors who refused to eat their fallen comrades. These men were found long after, their faces contorted in terror, their frozen mouths open in silent screams. What had they seen? And then there was the last, most haunting tale. Some Inuit hunters claimed they saw a lone survivor wandering the ice long after the others had died. A tall, bearded man, moving south. Could it have been Captain Crozier, desperately trying to reach safety? Or was it something else? In some versions of the tale, the man never spoke. He did not react to voices calling to him. His eyes, it is said, were black as the deepest Arctic night, and his breath came out in slow, shallow gasps. Like a man who had been dead for days but refused to stop walking. Some say he was still seen years later, long after all hope should have been lost. Was it Crozier? Had he somehow survived for years? Alone, trapped in a nightmare world between life and death? Or had something else taken his form, wearing his body like a frozen mask? For more than a century, the fate of HMS Terror remained a mystery. Some believed the ships had been swallowed by the ice, never to be seen again. Then, in 2016, a team of Canadian researchers made a shocking discovery. HMS Terror was found at the bottom of Terror Bay, almost perfectly preserved. The ship was eerily intact. Doors shut, windows unbroken, supplies still stored neatly inside. It was as if the crew had simply vanished. To this day, the Arctic refuses to give up all its secrets. Thank you for joining me on this journey into one of history's most chilling maritime mysteries. If you found this story as unnerving as I did, be sure to like this video, subscribe for more supernatural tales, and share your thoughts or theories in the comments below. Until next time, keep your eyes open for what lurks just beyond the veil of our understanding.